Hello, and welcome back to me talking about things that basically no one cares about. And today I'm going to be doing a deep dive into the Layton franchise, the Professor Layton franchise, just the Layton franchise, okay? And this franchise is, to put it lightly, a behemoth. In the main part, there's six or seven games, depending on who you ask. But the great and unfortunate part of the Layton franchise is that, like the hint coins, the creators had this marvelous idea of just hiding pieces of the canon literally like everywhere. Like there's a movie, there's an anime, there's a book, there's an iOS game, which might be on Android, I don't know. I know it's on iOS. But anyways, there's a manga, there's a crossover, there's like literally anything is fair game when it comes to introducing crucial aspects of the characters and their storylines. Like you would think that the main characters would really only have story introduced in like the main 6 or 7 games, but that's just not the case. Like the movie just gives some more like character building stuff, but the iOS game introduces a whole other character who is related to Professor Layton, and that seems a little bit important. And the anime basically acts like an epilogue for the whole game, or the whole original 6-game series. Another really difficult aspect of this franchise is the timeline in canon in relation to when things were released. So in the main video games, it kind of is like Star Wars, where there's like 2 trilogies, the main and the prequel trilogy, and then there is a significant time jump between the 2 trilogies and the later 7th main-ish game, slash the anime, because they cover around the same time period. And then there's the Ace Attorney crossover, which I'm going to talk about a little bit here, but Ace Attorney has like a pretty set timeline and Professor Layton doesn't. So no one really knows where to put that game in the Professor Layton timeline, because anywhere you were to put it based on the Ace Attorney timeline completely contradicts the Professor Layton timeline. So there's like somewhat of a consensus on where to put it. And here is the release timeline for everything. And then here is the canon timeline of what I'm going to be going through. So given all these difficulties, I've thought a lot about how I want to go over this whole franchise. And so I think the basic thing is I'm going to go through the main games and like the movie stuff in the order that it was released in. It's kind of a mix of the franchise order, of like the canon order and the release order, but it's a way that makes sense to me and kind of hopefully will make sense to you. So then I'm going to go through, like, based on all that, what like the main timeline is for Professor Layton, like where the trajectory of the main characters goes. And then I'm going to go through just like the main things that the franchise does really well and that the franchise kind of fails at. And then I'll wrap it up. So let's do it. Time to jump into the original trilogy. So the first game in the that was released was called Curious Village, and this game is such just like a sweetheart to me. So as like the entree into the Layton franchise, we meet Herschel Layton and Luke Triton as they drive through the countryside, and Layton hands Luke a letter kind of explaining the case. And so the case is the late Baron Reinhold told of a great treasure called the Golden Apple in his will, and anyone who finds the treasure will inherit his whole estate. And Layton, a gentleman, cares not for material goods, but what he does care about is the puzzle. He's come to solve the puzzle, and he, there's also a murder, but that's kind of incidental, and we'll talk about more of that. So they arrive in the village of St. Mystere, and the village and its inhabitants are indeed curious. Everyone loves puzzles and constantly presents them to Luke and Layton. Moreover, the villagers are just kind of like weird in other ways. It's a common occurrence that villagers will feel sick, get kidnapped, and then like return the next day. And people don't really care. Like, people are like, yeah, I guess that's kind of weird, but they don't really, I don't know, they don't really care about it. It's very odd. And also they all tell you to not go into the massive tower that looms over the town. Disclaimer, you will go into the tower that looms over town. So earlier I mentioned a murder, and the victim is Simon, and there's a detective who comes from London. He's kind of like a main character in the trilogy, and his name is Inspector Chelmy. Some people say Kelmy, but I think it's Chelmy. And so the victim, Simon, the detective, Chelmy, and the culprit, Layton? No, it's not Layton. See, Layton deduces, or we deduce through Layton, that the murderer is the inspector, or the master of disguise, disguised as the inspector, Don Paolo. And he disguises himself as the inspector in order to infiltrate the town and locate the treasure himself. But that's not really right either, because Don Paolo is not a murderer, because Simon wasn't murdered. Because Simon was never alive. See, after we investigate the looming tower and like do all the puzzles in the town, we find out, we find a young girl, Flora, at the top of the tower, and a man named Bruno. And Bruno is actually a mechanic who built and occasionally repairs the villagers, who are actually automatons or robots. And the late Baron commissioned him to build these automatons to look after and ultimately find the next caregivers for Flora, because she's the golden apple and she's Baron's daughter. And when she leaves the village with the fortune, the whole town and its inhabitants will shut down. So Layton and Flora and Luke decide to leave the fortune and tell no one about the curious village, so that the town can be left as is. Very sweet. But some notes, I personally would be pissed off if I went to find a treasure and now I'm a parent. Also, I touched on this in a previous Layton video, which like I'll link in the description, but there's just like some weird plot holes in all of these. All these games kind of require a certain suspension of disbelief, because Flora grew up with these kids, or like these villagers, when she was a kid, before her dad died. So, like, did her dad systematically kill and replace every villager? According to level 5, it's all irrelevant. Moving on to the next game. This game is my favorite. Like, my absolute favorite, not just in the series, but probably my favorite game ever. And it's also the most Swiss game, because it's full of holes. And again, I talked about this in a previous video, so check that out if you're interested. But the game starts out with Layton receiving a letter, as most of the games do, from his friend Dr. Schrader, who we will see later in the series. And Dr. Schrader tells of the Elysian Box, which is a box rumored to kill anyone who opens it. Naturally, Dr. Schrader tells Layton that, of course, he's planning to open it, but he's writing him this letter just in case if anything goes wrong and he does die, you know, he's telling Layton to figure it out. So Luke and Layton go to investigate Schrader's apartment, and he's dead. But the box is not there. Instead, they find a ticket for the infamous Voluntary Express. Infamous? Voluntary Express. But the ticket has no destination. So we have our first lead, because this is obviously a mystery. Because they are assholes. They don't tell Flora, even though that's her guardian, and I don't think that's very gentlemanly of Layton. But she follows them anyways, because she's awesome. And all three of them are on the Voluntary Express. The train first visits the town of Dropstone, and this town is celebrating its 50th anniversary, which will be important later. They explore the town. Flora gets lost for a bit, but they find her, and they head back to the train. And right before they board, they notice Katya, a member, or a resident of the town, and she's like the daughter of the village's mayor, and she boards the train in the hopes of fulfilling her grandmother's dying wish. And we don't really know what that is, but that's what we see. So once they're back on the train, Layton, I don't know, he realizes like something about the destination, that we're going to a town called Falsense, the phantom town of Falsense, and they figure out that they need to be in the deluxe car to get there. So they sneak onto the deluxe car, and they're drugged as two of the cars switch tracks on there's two trains and they switch cars. Either way, they're heading to the town of Falsense. So when they get off the train at Falsense, they enter into the abandoned station. It's completely abandoned, run down, but it's lined with old pictures from about 50 years ago, because remember, Layton's an archaeologist, even though you literally never see him do his job. But anyways, you see these pictures, and a few moments later, they're all hit with this, like, strange, like, feeling, like, the whole screen shakes, and they're all like, whoa, whoa, and suddenly they see that Falsense that stands before them is the exact same as the false sense in the picture, and the station transforms into like a beautiful, like brand new station right before their eyes. So they're all like, that's pretty weird.
What on earth?
Professor, what was that?
Let's go. Ah. Oh my.
Whoa.
Huh?
What was that?
Ah. Just what is going on here?
I don't know, but it's strange.
Now, in a very Layton-esque form, everyone in this town is also a bit of a freak, essentially. There's a huge rumor that there's a vampire who lives in the looming, very vampire-y castle. Again, everyone tells you not to go there, and again, you will go there. And everyone also tells you that, like, the town is cursed. Like, that's something you hear a couple times, and you're like, that's a little weird, but okay, whatever. Detective Chalmy and his, like, assistant dude, Barton, have also ended up in false sense because they're investigating Schrader's murder. They're also trying to find the box, because Chalmy's like, if you find the box, you find the killer. And he's right, kind of. So Layton solves the mystery of who killed Schrader. It was Flora! But it actually wasn't, because again, it's our friend, Master of Disguise, Don Paolo. He kidnapped Flora in Dropstone, and he points out, he's like, she's probably fine, she's fine, but she's probably freaking pissed that you guys didn't realize. And again, it's insane to me that Layton is this bad at taking care of this girl that he is, like, guardian of. And adopted kids becomes a thing with him, so, you know, just remember that for later. So, Don Paolo stole the box from Schrader, and after revealing his presence, like, Chalmy's like, okay, shit, well, I'm gonna arrest you now. So he runs, drops the box, we now have the box. The owner of the Monetary Express, Mr. Beluga, is one of the founding family of False Sense. So False Sense was founded by the Hertzens, and Mr. Beluga, the owner of the Monetary Express, is a Hertzen, so he's like, that box is mine. But everyone in the town is like, no, it's not, because you abandoned the town. So, no. So Luke and Layton open the box, and they die, and the game is over. So thank you for watching. No, just kidding. Literally nothing happens. The box is empty. But after this, they explore the town more, and they learn the history of the town, and just like do what Team Layton does. So the Hertzen family built a massive mine and made their fortune off of the gold found in it and off of another weird thing found in it. So like the mine brought the town to life, but again it killed it because 50 years ago, a lot of the residents actually fell ill after mining really got going. So the mine closed and a bunch of people like just fled. And now Anton Hertzen, the last Hertzen, he's kind of the big cheese, and he still lives in the castle, but everyone's like, oh, I guess he's like still around. It's very weird, but so he's still here. And it's time to go into the castle, because clearly we've gotta go to the castle. Also, a lot of this information you learn from these like diary entries that you like unlock. You find this old diary that has like the Hertzen seal, and so you learn a lot of this through that. So there's like a lot of storytelling in this game, so that's why this part's kind of long. But continuing on, we head into the castle, and we meet Anton Hertzen, who is my favorite character in the whole franchise. He's just like classic, like vampire, like cool vampire. He's a cool vampire. I don't know what else to tell you. That's just what he is. So anyways, we meet him, and he looks exactly like he did in the photos from 50 years ago. So again, vampire theory not looking that outlandish. And it's certainly no more outlandish than the actual truth that we're going to soon discover. But anyways, Anton ties Luke and Layton up and explains that he's literally going to eat them. And so they should just like make peace with that and do whatever they need to do, like mentally. So Layton escapes because he's Layton, and it's not very gentlemanlike to be eaten by a vampire. And on the way out, they find Katia, and Luke and Layton are like, we've got to go. And she's like, no, blah, blah, blah. So anyways, Anton finds them, and he starts calling Katya his beloved Sophia, and you're like, that's a little weird. Basically accuses her of cheating on him with Layton. Layton and Anton spar because Layton's actually a great fencer. More on that later. And Anton collapses, and finally the truth is all revealed. So Anton's youth, nothing more than an illusion, because the whole fucking town is nothing more than an illusion. So when the miners struck precious ore that made the town so rich, they also struck a vein of hallucinogenic gas. And this gas, coupled with the old pictures in the False Sense station, made Luke, Layton, and everyone else see False Sense exactly as it used to be. And it also made Anton see himself as he used to be. And naturally, as one would, he attributed this eternal youth to being a vampire. So there's that. And the Elysium box held traces of this gas, and people who heard the legend and were expecting to see some sort of like death-causing thing hallucinated their worst fear and basically had a heart attack and died. But who is Katya, and why was the box even circulated? So Katya is the granddaughter of Anton and Sophia, and these two had like, such a sad, like, grand, tragic romance. One thing you learn about this game is it just does tragic, like, it does tragedy so well. But the two had a great romance. But when they struck the gas, Sophia realized that this wasn't safe, and she was secretly pregnant with Anton's baby. But because of Anton's like family and the expectations his father had of him, she knew that he would never be able to leave the town. So she fled, hiding her pregnancy, and she explained her departure really vaguely in a way that gave Anton literally no other choice than to believe that she fell in love with someone else. And the Elysium box was just a box used to try to send a letter to her. But because of its value, it kept getting stolen, and that's where the legend started, I guess. So Luke and Layton solve a puzzle on the box to reveal a secret compartment, and in there's a letter from Sophia to Anton, because the box made it to her after all. And this letter explains all of this, and explains how she loved Anton until the day that she died, and how she wanted nothing more than for him to meet his granddaughter Katya. And that's why Katya came here, to fulfill her grandmother's wish. I think I'm going to play the cutscene that tells you all this, because it is just like, this game is so good. Like, it has so many plot holes, obviously. The whole town is fake, but still, like, the core story is still so good, so I'll play that.
It's Sophia's handwriting. The box must have made it to her after all.
My dear Anton, are you well? I received your letter. Though I'd like nothing more than to see you again, I'm afraid I no longer have the strength to do so. You don't know how many times I've thought about you over the years. I often wonder if you hate me for what I did. Do you? When I decided to leave, I was carrying our child. I couldn't bear exposing that tiny life to such danger. I knew your father's position, and understood you didn't have the option to leave with me. Even though I did the only thing I could, I'll always regret leaving you that way. But there's one bright spot in this sad story, and that is our lovely granddaughter, Katya. My departure all those years ago has given you the chance to meet. Katya's mother died shortly after she was born, but Katya grew up strong and sweet just the same. She reminds me of you every time she smiles. With her around, I could never forget about you, even if I wanted to. You've been in my thoughts since the day we parted, and now, though my time here is drawing to a close, I like to think we'll meet again on the other side. The thought of seeing your face warms my heart. Be well and be happy, my dear Anton. Goodbye. But just for now, your Sophia.
Oh, Sophia. I finally understand now.
grandfather.
Grandfather? Yes, that's right. It has a nice ring to it. I am so happy we met, my dear granddaughter.
You don't know how much this means to me.
It's been so long, so very long in fact, that I had forgotten what love even felt like. Instead, my love for Sophia was replaced by anger, and that anger completely blinded me. But now I can see the world clearly again, thanks to you, my granddaughter. Are you listening, Sophia? I'll have to put off returning to your side for a while. There's someone I need to get to know here first. Will you forgive me for making you wait just a little longer, my dear?
Wherever she is, I'm sure she's very happy for us.
It's just so sad. Anyways, after solving the mystery, Luke and Layton head back home, pick up dear snubbed Flora on the way, and come back to a surprise that Schrader was not actually dead. He was just in a coma, because we conveniently need him for the next story in this trilogy. So, before we can talk about the final story in the first trilogy, this is the point in the timeline where I have to address the Ace Attorney crossover. So I mentioned that these games have a really weird timeline, and again, Ace Attorney crossover just completely complicates this. So from what I understand, the Ace Attorney games, again, have a pretty solid timeline, and I think they take place around like early 2000s, like almost near modern day, like 2021, and the Layton games are like placed around the 1960s, and the developers said that they would have put Curious Village in 1960 canonically, but they didn't want to be limited by the technology like of that time. They didn't want that to be the only things that they could use in the game. Also, this would have put Layton as fighting in World War I or II. So think about that. 1960 and 2020, it doesn't matter how close to 1960 we are, they're quite a ways away. And the placement of the crossover game in Layton timeline is kind of shaky at best. But most people place it somewhere in the first trilogy, and it has to be before the next game, so I'm going to place it here. I'm not going to talk about this game that much because the plot is so insanely complicated, but it is really cool, and it's very Layton-esque, in that there's town shenanigans, and it doesn't really add much to Luke and Layton's, like, character canon. It's just like more character building, but I felt like I had to mention it because it is definitely in the canon and a lot of people play and talk about it. So that's that game. So the third game in the first trilogy is the Unwound Future, or the Lost Future. I don't know, all these games, a bunch of them have like different names in like the British version, and like it just doesn't, the Unwound Future, the Lost Future, like it's not, I'm a linguist, so I can say that there isn't that much difference between British English and American English that you needed to localize it like that. Anyways, this game, again, starts off with a lovely letter, but this letter is a bit more intriguing than the past ones because it was sent from future Luke to past Luke, and he writes that he is 10 years in the future where his London is in absolute chaos due to a calamity that has not yet happened in little Luke's timeline. And so he directs them to a clock shop where they will be able to meet. So Layton believes that this letter is connected to an incident that happened a week earlier in the present-day timeline, in which a doctor named Dr. Stangun, I don't know, it's spelled weird, Dr. Stangun, we'll go with that, was demonstrating his new time machine. And he used the Prime Minister as the guinea pig, again, as one would, and the thing fucking exploded. And all the scientists and the Prime Minister, whose name is Bill Hawks, disappear without a trace, and obviously not really great. So, whatever. Layton's like, I think that's related. So they head to this clock shop. The whole floor starts shaking, and then boom, they're in London 10 years in the future. So they're obviously skeptical of this latest temporal inconsistency. And future Luke left them another letter in the shop, just to like, in the hopes of dispelling these incertitudes. And this letter leads them to discovering an aged Dr. Schrader in a hospital. And this Schrader tells them that in this timeline, there are some unsavory rumors about Layton. And he directs them to meet future Luke at the Gilded Seven Casino. So once there, they finally meet future Luke. And he explains that in this London, an evil genius popped up, staged a coup, and basically ruled over the city. And this guy is obsessed with time travel and teamed up with Dr. Stangun in order to create a working time machine. And young Luke is like, sounds like Don Paolo, because that was the villain in the 2 previous video games. But future Luke really reveals that it's actually future Layton. So obviously Layton cannot let this go, because he's like, I don't know, I just don't think that I would do that. So the Lukes and Layton set off to investigate this mystery. While in future London, Layton spots a woman that he knows, and this triggers an important flashback.
Huh? Yeah. Oh.
Huh? Professor?
Oh, it's just beautiful, Herschel.
Oh, do you really like it?
I don't just like it. I love it. Thank you so much.
Picking out the right gift can be quite the puzzle.
Lucky for me, every puzzle has an answer. Isn't that what you always say?
Yes, well. I've been thinking,
Go on.
if I were to get the teaching job, then we... Well,
I'm listening, Herschel.
oh, I'll tell you later.
Come on now. Tell me more about these plans of yours.
No, it was nothing. Now let's eat before our food gets cold.
Hey, you can't just change the subject.
What are you talking about? I did nothing of the sort.
You most certainly did.
What?
Huh?
Here you go.
What's this now?
Open it and see.
A hat?
For the newly appointed professor. Congratulations.
Thank you.
You're a fully fledged member of the academic community now. So you've got to look the part. Very dashing, Herschel. The picture of a true gentleman.
A true gentleman?
No, leave it on. It suits you. It really does. So no taking it off. Oh, look at the time. I didn't realize how late it was. I have to go to the lab. We're running a very important experiment today. Let's continue this celebration over dinner tonight. Oh, and promise me you'll wear the hat. It's not your usual style, but keep an open mind. After all, isn't that what a gentleman does?
We learn that this lookalike is named Claire, and that she was the professor's old sweetheart. And 10 years ago from the beginning of the game, so I guess 20 years ago from future London, the professor gave her a pocket watch on the day that he last saw her, because that day she died in a failed experiment. They continue investigating this future London. They see a bunch of guys in lab coats who are just dripping wet. Interesting. Keep that for later. They also learn that they can use the clock shop to go back to present day London, so it basically creates a wormhole from with 10 years apart. So at some point we go back to investigate a possible connection between future London, the missing Prime Minister Bill Hawks, and the explosion that killed Claire, because Layton believes that the Prime Minister is being held captive in the future. In classic rudeness, when they come back, they tried to leave Flora behind again. But she follows, in her classic hijinks, she follows them along with Detective Chelmy and Barton, because Layton's like, oh, by the way, I think the Prime Minister's in the future, and Chelmy's like, okay, well, I have to follow you, because what? So anyways, they're all in the future. After more investigating, they head to this restaurant called the Thames Arms, and that's where evil Layton is said to frequent, but no one's there right now, at least, so now they're off to what's called the Towering Pagoda. There's a tower in every single one. There's always something looming. There's just something looming. That's one thing about this franchise. So they head to the Towering Pagoda. That's Evil Layton's headquarters, and they meet Evil Layton himself. But Evil Layton is none other than, not Don Paolo, than Dr. Standgun, who is none other than Dimitri Allen. We'll learn more about him later. So Dimitri Allen has taken Bill Hawks, the Prime Minister, hostage, and he cages the whole group. At this point, Layton, inside the cage, reveals that he's actually Don Paolo. And the real Layton just appears outside of the cage and frees them. So everyone's like, what the hell?
Thanks for meeting me on such short notice, Herschel.
Oh, no, it's my pleasure.
Here, this is for you.
What is it?
A letter, of course. Read it at home.
Why don't you just tell me what it says? I'm right here, after all.
My, you're making this quite difficult. What I want to say is, well, in short, this.
You will pay for this someday!
What was that?
Huh?
So Don Paolo reveals that he also loved Claire and is looking for the same answers as Layton. So at some point, Layton recruited him to help with his disguisey stuff. Okay. So after some planning, Luke, Layton, and Flora figure out a way to cross the river, and because the river is the reason why all the lab coats were wet, so they're like, we probably got to go over there. And they head into the time machine facility where all these scientists were working on a time machine. So once there, they meet Claire, who's actually her twin sister, Celeste. On the way back across the river, Layton talks to little Luke about how the explosion that killed Claire actually leveled whole buildings, and he even remembers seeing an orphan child crying in the streets after the incident. Layton even tried to investigate the incident, but Bill Hawks' cronies, because Bill Hawks was working at this lab too, beat the shit out of him. So this lab was Bill Hawks, Dimitri Allen, and Claire. And Claire died because she was the one used as the guinea pig in the time machine. So now the group is back at the Thames Arms, where all is revealed. Future London is a complete fake. Every town is fake. If I had to summarize this series, I would say it's sad, and every town is fake. The clock shop is a massive elevator that leads into a giant underground cavern where this huge, just like film set has been built. Dimitri Allen reveals the whole story. So he worked, like I said, with Claire and Bill Hawks in the lab 10 years ago, working on a time machine. Bill Hawks rushed the experiment, ignoring a flaw that Dimitri Allen told him about, and so he killed Claire. Bill then used all the money he made from the experiment to become prime minister, and Dimitri wanted to build a time machine to stop the accident from ever happening because he also loved Claire. So Dimitri then, down here, poses Layton in order to lure the real Layton down here, so that he needed to use, like, his memories to recreate the failed experiment from 10 years ago, so that he could go back in time and save Claire. But Dimitri is actually a pawn for someone else, and that someone else is future Luke. Because once you start to realize that this is not the future, then you have to say, then who the hell is that? Because there's only one Luke. So future Luke is named Clive, and he was the young orphan that Layton remembers, and he basically just wants to get revenge and destroy London. So he triggers a massive machine, and basically tries to, like, bomb London from underneath. The professor obviously stops this. He's got to do his classic thing where he grabs a girl and rolls. It's just his thing. Then Clive reveals that after all said and done, Clive reveals, like, that he sent Layton the letter in the first place in the hopes that he would kind of come and, like, save him from his own insanity. So Dimitri and Layton talk, and this is where it gets sad. I told you all these games are so tragic and sad. And it turns out that Claire never actually had a twin sister. So Celeste, or the girl that Layton saw, is the real Claire. And when she died in the explosion, the time machine actually worked for a split second and sent Claire 10 years into the future, which is the present. Unfortunately, the time machine can't support her in the present, and she eventually has to go back to the moment of the explosion, and this is why Dimitri was working so hard to save her, so that she wouldn't have to do that. So at the very end, Layton kisses her goodbye, and she disappears to be blown up, and that is really sad. So I'm going to play that scene too, because I just can't explain how sad it is.
I suppose this is it, Herschel. I have to go back to my own time, back to that day when we parted.
No, Claire.
I'm sorry, I can't stay.
Claire, wait!
We had so many plans for the future. You won't forget, will you? Our shared past and our lost future.
You can't go! I don't want to say goodbye again. I can't. I won't!
I know you. And I know you'll stay strong. After all, that's what a gentleman does. I must go now, Herschel. Thank you for everything. Goodbye.
She's gone!
Again, everybody in this game, like, loved Claire. Layton loved Claire, Dr. Stangun loved Claire, Don Paolo loved Claire, and, like, again, that's just why it makes it so, so, so sad that she has to go back, because she had all these people who, like, loved her, and she's the whole reason, you know, Layton and Claire dated, obviously, and that was what made Don Paolo hate Layton. So she's a pretty big part of that plot line, but just to clear that up. So after that, we see Luke about to board a ship with his parents. He says goodbye to Layton, and the Luke and Layton story officially ends here. So now we're heading into the sequel trilogy and the other pieces of media that fit within that. So this game starts out with Herschel Layton at Gresson Heller University, which is the university we're all supposed to believe he works at. Again, Professor Layton does not do his job, so I don't know why he says he's an archaeologist, because he literally never does his job. Anyways, he's just received a letter from his old friend, Clark Triton. So Layton and his assistant at the time, whose name is Emmy Altava, rush out the door, head to the town of, I always mispronounce this, Miss Dallery. So what was in the letter? Well, Clark Triton is the mayor of the town, and this quaint village has been recently embroiled in a curious mystery. It's actually pretty awful. A specter has been destroying the town at the call of flute music, and it's been targeting houses that have been marked with, like, the witch's mark. What's more is there's this unknown oracle who's been warning the town of where these attacks are going to happen and basically evacuating them. So no one's died, but, like, I mean, half the town's destroyed. It's pretty messed up. So Layton and Emmy arrive. They learn that it was not Clark, but Clark's son Luke who sent the letter, and Luke is also the mysterious oracle. And Luke's so cute in this one, because this is when, like, he's so young, and he's just cute. But so soon after their arrival, the Spectre appears, as Luke predicted. But how does Luke know where and when the Spectre would appear, and also what the hell is the Spectre and why is it attacking the town? So there's, like, a whole bunch of puzzle solving, you know, classic investigation. There's a black market. It's fun, but it's not really that complicated. But after, well, I lied, it is a little complicated. But after much investigation into the town and its shadowy underbelly, the trio, Layton, Emmy, and Luke, learn that Miss Dallery has two Spectres, a bad one and a good one. And the bad Spectre is called, it's Big Machine, run by John Descolet. And this is a man that Layton seems to know, but we don't really know how. So Descolet had targeted the town because it sat atop the ancient Golden Garden, which is an archaeological site. Okay, I guess the man does a bit of archaeology here and there. But this site belongs to the great Azran civilization. And this Azran civilization is, like, a big part of this trilogy. So just, like, remember that. And using mining machines, Descolet has been systematically digging around the town to find the legendary site and just, like, destroying buildings. The second Spectre, the good Spectre, was revealed to be Lucia, who is basically, like, this, like, Loch Ness Monster type thing. She's like a giant manatee, and she's the last of her kind. And so Ariana, who's one of Luke's friends who lives in the town in this, like, old house because her parents died. When Ariana played a flute, Lucia would emerge from the lake and fight Descolet's machines to help save the town. And I mean, she did, like, a bit of damage too, so did she really help? It is debatable. But Lucia also had a second motive, because Ariana, Luke's friend, was extremely sick, and Lucia wanted to help cure her. So after they defeat Descolet's, like, they defeat his machine by Lucia, like, destroys the dam in the city to, like, flood it and kill the machines, and defeat Descolet, and he runs away, whatever. But so Lucia leads them back to an Azran seal that was under the reservoir at the bottom of the lake, and opening the seal by solving a puzzle reveals the Golden Garden, which is a pristine environment with pure air that could cure Ariana's illness. So once inside, Lucia collapses from the sheer exhaustion of fighting, and she dies in easily the saddest lake monster death I think I've ever seen in a video game. So I'll show that here too.
Moses here for me, didn't you? I'm sorry. I didn't understand. You wanted to give me this gift. This beautiful gift. ride on your back again, please. Aisha. No. She used her last ounce of strength to bring you to this wonderful place. She sacrificed her own life to be sure that yours would be safe. It's not fair. Did you hear what she said? Well, I understood it. Lucia said, thank you to you both.
Again, it's sad. Like, it's sad. All these games are sad. And it's just so impressive. Oh, we'll talk about it later. But anyways, at the end, Ariana is healed, Desclée is fled, and Luke has decided to permanently join Layton and Emmy because, again, there's very little parental oversight in these games, and that's fine with his parents, I guess, or his dad. I think his mom's dead. So he joins Layton and Emmy in their puzzle-solving endeavors, and this game introduces us to the cast of characters for the prequel series. Again, it's a prequel. So those characters are Layton, obviously, Luke, Emmy, and Desclée, the backstory of whom we will track throughout the series. There are some other reoccurring characters. We have, like, the Chelmy analog, and his name, I love this, his name is Clamp Grosky. Clamp Grosky. And he's a London detective. He skips arm day, leg day, and basically anything other than chest day. And he runs fast. And he'll be back later, as with his fan girl. He's got, like, a fan club. Side note, him and Emmy have, like, an enemies to lovers, but, like, they're never lovers. I don't know. It's kind of a fun dynamic, but whatever. So the game also obviously introduces a larger plot that kind of follows the whole trilogy. And this is the relationship between Desclée and Layton, because Desclée is kind of like the Don Paolo of the last series. And so, anyways, so Layton seems to know Desclée, and Desclée knows Layton, but how? Okay, so the next piece in the in-universe timeline is the movie Professor Layton and the Eternal Diva, aka Professor Layton, the first movie, which is slightly a misnomer because, like somebody waiting for the finale John Locke lost episode, we all realized that there would be no more. So, very sad. But the movie begins back in the timeline of the first trilogy. So somewhere in those three games, Luke and Layton investigate the theft of Big Ben, discover it's Don Paolo, solve that case, whatever. Go back to the office, and they listen to a record called The Eternal Diva, and Luke's like, I remember this case. And they flash back to this framed narrative plot, which takes place right after the last Spectre. Again, I told you this timeline is confusing. In this frame, Layton receives a letter, classic, it's a letter, from a former student of his, Janice. And Janice is an opera singer, and she's invited Layton to come see a performance about the lost city of Ambrosia. So in addition to wanting Layton to see her beautiful mezzo, she wants him to investigate a few things. Mainly, and most concerningly, her dead friend, Melina, has come back to life in the body of another young girl. So, naturally, Layton is a little intrigued. So Luke and Layton realize that the opera's pianist and composer is named Oswald Whistler, who is the father of the dead, not-so-dead Melina. Anyways, once at the Opry House, A masked man basically takes the entire audience hostage and says that they're now forced participants in a game. And the winner receives the elixir of life, and all the losers die. So this is quite a dark turn for the Laytonverse. But speeding this along, the whole opera turns into a boat, literally so classic. I cannot express to you how much this series and this franchise loves to say, this is a town, or a whole city block. Actually, it's a massive boat. Actually, it's a whole other town underneath London. Actually, it's a whole phantom town. Actually, it's all automatons. It's a classic. It's a classic. So they're on this boat, kidnaps the audience, whatever. And the whole game is essentially a pretense for Oswald and the masked gentleman, who we figure out is Descalais, to find the smartest person who is basically going to become the vessel for Oswald's dead daughter's memories. So Oswald is somehow, he has this machine that can, like, pluck memories, and he did this to his daughter right before she died and put him into some other girl, which is just, that's terrifying. Like, that's literally terrifying. But there was some sort of, like, incompatibility with the body. Well, she was still alive, but, like, with her, but the actual live girl's brain, and so she started to, like, reject it. Yeah, these games, man. These games. But, I mean, it's still really sad. Like, he went through all this just to save his daughter. And naturally, Descalais has an ulterior motive because he does not give a shit about this guy's daughter. But he needs Janice, who again died. He needs her to sing the Song of the Sea in order to raise that lost city of Ambrosia. So he needed her memory. So that's why he was working with Oswald. Okay, it's me editing, and I realized this movie's like really confusing, and so I realized I kind of like messed up in explaining this. So Janice never died, but Janice was also a test subject for this machine, and like because she was a close friend of Melina's, she was like willing to like accept Melina's memories, and like Melina's dad is like, oh cool, like yay, my daughter's not actually dead, like she's in Janice, but then this is when Descalais like kidnaps Melina / Janice and attempts and needs her voice to raise Ambrosia. So because Melina in Janice's body is the only one that knows the Song of the Sea. So yeah, you know, in the end, Oswald like realizes that this is wrong and realizes he has to like just like let his daughter go, and that's what his daughter wants. So again, pretty sad. Because, I don't know, it's sad, it's messed up, but it's still sad, alright? Big machine, big fight, Layton grab girl, roll, Descalais gets away, scene. Okay, so beginning where the Eternal Diva left off, now we have Professor Layton and the Miracle at Mask. So this game, of course, begins with the professor receiving a letter from his old friend Angela, who tells a pretty horrifying tale. She lives in a city called Montador, where a masked gentleman, and the mask is called the Mask of Chaos. He's performing dark miracles using this mask. He's turning people to stone and other things that are just, like, weird. So, the mask is actually an archaeological Azran artifact that the professor seems to be familiar with, and it's said to grant the wearer great powers. So Layton, naturally, because he is an archaeologist, he's interested, and he seems to know about it. So Luke, Emmy, and Layton head to the town, and here we learn a bit more backstory. Layton was friends with Angela through a guy named Randall, who was Layton's childhood friend, and Angela's old BF. So Randall and Angela dating, Randall and Layton friends. Randall died in an accident that we'll hear more about later, but Angela married Henry, who's like Randall's like, not like childhood butler, because he's the same age as Randall, but he's like, I guess the kid of Randall's like maids? I don't know. So Henry found the mask and found some other like treasure, which we'll talk about later, while looking for Randall, and it made him a millionaire, basically, and he founded this town, Montador. But the Mask of Chaos was stolen, and that's why this random masked gentleman miracle dude has it. So then we get a flashback where we get to see Randall and Layton as kids, and Randall showed Angela and Layton that he found the Mask of Chaos, and they're like, damn, shit, okay, I thought this was a myth, like, did not think this was real, because we also see them in class talking, like, their professor or teacher, whoever's, like, saying that it's BS. And we also meet a guy named Alphonse, who's like, okay, archaeology is stupid, you'll never make money off that, and he's in the present timeline, so, like, remember that name. So back in the present, the Layton trio do some investigating, they do what they do, and they end up working with Clamp Grosky.
Yeah.
Our dude. They come to suspect Alphonse of being the masked gentleman because he had some sort of, like, financial motive. It's not important, but so they suspect him. And Luke and Emmy are like, all right, okay, cool. But Layton, you gotta tell us more about how you know Randall and that whole story. So he's like, of course, a gentleman always obliges. So back in the past, Randall found the mask, and he also, on the back of the mask, found, or with the mask, I don't know, he found a map to the ruins of this lost Azran site called Akbadain. And sorry about my hand. Anyways, and Randall's intent on finding this lost Azran site because Randall is actually really interested in archaeology, and Herschel Layton at this point in time is not really. So he's like, I'm gonna find these Akbadain ruins, and Angela is like distraught. She really doesn't want him to do this because her own brother disappeared. I don't think we really hear any more about this, but she doesn't want Randall to disappear either. He reassures her that this is going to be his last expedition. So I'm sure you can guess what's coming. And she also kind of asks Layton to go with him, and Layton goes with him because, again, he doesn't really give a shit about archaeology, but he wants him to be safe. So we flash back to the present day, and Alphonse he completely denies being the masked gentleman. They do some more investigating, see another dark miracle, blah, blah, blah. But again, right now, like, we really only care about the flashbacks. And we get another one. Or, I don't know, storytelling, flashbacks, whatever. So Layton goes along with Randall on this expedition. And they do some, I'm sorry, I'm hearing noises. Okay, didn't like that. What? Anyways. Layton and Randall are looking for these ruins, so they venture into this, like, gorge, according to the map. Again, I don't know where the hell in England this is, because this doesn't look like England. But anyways, they end up going really, 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 like, far down into the earth, into these, like, I don't know, tunnel things. There's, like, mummies. It's weird. And when they're right, like, at a treasure room, after a lot of, like, puzzle solving and stuff, Randall actually ends up falling into an abyss.
We've made it! Herschel, there's the door! We're sinking! Randall! Just drop the mask! Give me your other hand, Randall! Randall! I can't hold on! I was so close. I'm sorry, Herschel. I let you down. Tell Angela I'm sorry. I can't pull you up. No, give me your other hand. Take the mask. It's yours. You must solve the last puzzle, Herschel. Here. Randall!
And Layton finds a treasure, but he takes nothing but a coin from it. He returns back to the town to tell Angela and everyone there. A bunch of people start like a search party, but they don't find him. And that's when Henry finds the treasure and the mask. But Layton leaves the coin on Randall's eventual empty grave, and he leaves this small hometown to go to London. So we're back in the present time, continuing to investigate, and we notice that Angel's acting a little bit weird and asking us all about if we found the mask and all that. And we meet a man named Leon Bronev, and he will become important. And he's looking for the third set of Azran ruins, the first two being the Golden Garden and the Lost City of Ambrosia from The Last Spectre and Eternal Diva. So the masked man then kidnaps Luke. We eventually get him back, obviously. And he is revealed to be, as you might have guessed, Randall. So Randall reveals that he was saved by an underground river, and he ended up in a village where he lived for a really long time, having no memory of who he used to be, until one day he got a letter telling him all about his past. And this letter also conveniently mentioned how he could get his revenge by donning the mask, becoming the masked gentleman, and committing these miracles. Which we've like uncovered how they weren't actually miracles. But again, that's not really what we care about here. It's not what I care about. So it's not what we all collectively care about. Yeah, so he tries to get revenge on Henry for supposedly stealing his girlfriend, and, you know, that's why we're here. That's the plot. So Layton and the trio ends up using the Mask of Chaos and another mask called the Mask of Order to uncover the ruins of Akbadain, and this ends up saving the city from, like, the last dark miracle, which was gonna, like, just, like, flood the city with sand, basically. So Randall learns that Henry didn't actually betray him, and he actually used the treasure to found this town, and he founded this town, like, with the legend of the mask at its core, hoping to, I guess, like if Randall ever reappeared and was found, it would, like, kind of, like, lure him back, and it worked, so great plan. And actually the whole town is, like, legally in Randall's name. And Henry only married Angela because otherwise she would have had to marry Alphonse, because remember, this is like kind of the 50s at this point. So Layton then reveals that Randall was actually used by a pawn by whoever sent these letters, and that person is Descalay, who at some point kidnapped Angela and was disguised as her, and that's why she's been acting weird. And he disguised as her to, like, try to get the masks. So at the end, Descalay gets away. We see him at the Akbadain chambers.
It's quite beautiful, wouldn't you say? Huh? Hold your ground. It is perfect weather for a day of world domination. Trespassers, this site is now controlled by Targent. Do we go quietly? These cowards are not in charge here. You are not recognized as any type of authority. And you disgust me with your demented worldview. I will not let you steal that which I have earned. He's of no concern. Forget him. Secure the last of the Azran ruins. Years of work. Well worth it. Well worth it. Mist Hallory's Garden of Healing. Ambrosia, the City of Harmony. And now, the Nautilus Chamber of Akbadain. We finally have all three of the great legacies. And when I'm finished, the power of the Azran civilization shall be ours.
So, I don't know about you, but seems like a great setup for a third and final game of a trilogy, baby. So now we move on to the last game in the prequel trilogy, and kind of the last like main canon within the canon game, the main Luke and Layton story officially. So this game begins, would you believe, with a letter. And this letter is from a guy named Desmond Sycamore, who is also an archaeologist, because again, we're still meant to believe that Professor Layton is an archaeologist and that he does that job. But so he talks about how he discovered a living mummy, and I mean the Layton trio, they've got to see this. So they board this airship called the Bostonius that, like, I guess Sycamore sends for them, and it takes them to Frauenberg, this town where Sycamore discovered the mummy. So they meet Sycamore, find the mummy. She's a girl, like, just trapped in the ice. They free her, but right after she's freed, Leon Bronev makes her appearance, and him and the group Targent kidnap her. So the Layton trio break into Targent's airship, and the girl, like, triggers some sort of, like, sonic shockwave, and they escape, but they basically crash the whole, like, airships. So they crash into this town, and in that crash, she gets separated. So once in this town, they're all looking for the girl, and they find her walking across a lake, and puzzle solving. They figure out it's just ice underneath. But so they follow her. She goes into this chamber, and she's basically just like chanting. She's identifying herself as Aurora, an emissary of the Azran people, and she explains that in order to discover the secret of the Azran, they have to gather these like eggs. They're eggs, and they're all around the world. And there are coordinates on the side of the walls of the cave telling them where to go. So, baby, you know we're going on this globe-trotting adventure. So they do that. Well, no. Well, they do. But first they go back to London to prepare for this massive voyage and ostensibly get a passport for this random girl, Aurora, although admittedly I don't know much about airship customs. They get back, preparing, blah, 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 and we learn while we're in London that our dear friend Clamp Grosky is also investigating Targent because Targent's responsible for a robbery in London, and they even have like a guy working on the inside in Scotland Yard. Obviously Layton unmasks this dude, no problem, and he ends up being a detective that we worked with in Monte d'Or. I didn't talk about him at all because he's not really that important. So after they do that, they're like, well, time to find these eggs. So they go on this epic adventure, collect all the eggs, and it's really cool. I'm not going to talk about it too much because, like, I don't know. They just go to these different, like, cool places and, like, solve mysteries or, like, puzzles, and they find the eggs. So they do that. It's cool. But I will say, again, as an anthropologist, and Professor Layton's an archaeologist, he's an anthropologist, he's very bad at dealing with other cultures. There's this one point where, like, they just start shaming this whole culture for, like, their marriage practices, and I'm like, bro, I mean, I guess that is in line with 60s British archaeology and anthropology, but we're not getting into ethics today. Anyways, so they gather all the eggs, and Aurora starts to get some of her memories back, because, again, she didn't really remember much. And they realize that one of the eggs they gathered is a fake, and that Targent took it. So they infiltrate Targent right there and then. Liam Broner was like, we're not so different, you and I. What say you join Targent? And Layton obviously says, absolutely not. So then Liam Broner shows a video of Layton's parents and is like, that's fine, but if you don't join me, I'm going to kill your parents. But then Sycamore, like, steps in and is like, remember who you are, and kind of talks about how he makes some vague references to, like, how Targent ruined his life, but Layton declines. So all 5 of them have the real eggs, and all 5 of these form a master key. But then at this point, Sycamore reveals himself to be Descalais, which is, I guess, somewhat obvious in the game, but not really. They fight. Descalais flees back to Frauenberg, and the trio plus Aurora goes back to Frauenberg because this is where they have to use that master key. So they head back to the first cave where they found Aurora, and they find Bronev, and they all start to fight. But then the second big shock of this game comes when Emmy Altava, our assistant for the entire trilogy, reveals that she's been working for Liam Bronev because he is her uncle.
keystone.
Emmy, what's going on?
Stop it, Emmy! This isn't funny! No, it's not. I'm deadly serious.
Emmy, do you mean to say...
That's right. I work for Targent.
Targent?
All the time I was working as your assistant, I was watching you. My instructions were to report all your findings relating to the Azran.
It can't be! Say it isn't true, Emmy!
The key. Hand it over.
Emmy, why? Why are you doing this? You know what's at stake. If the Azran Legacy is awakened, a terrible fate will befall the world.
Think about it, Emmy! You can't do this! Please don't!
Everything I've done has been for Uncle Leon. Uncle Leon is all I have in this world.
What?
I'm sorry, Professor.
Good work, Emily.
And again, this is like really insane. Like, I don't know, it hurts. So her and Bronev take Aurora and Luke deeper into the cave with this key to get to like the interiormost chamber or whatever. And she eventually lets Luke go. But anyways, with all this revealed, Descalay and Layton team up to defeat Bronev. And again, Emily lets Luke go because she comes to realize that this Bronev is not the same uncle that she like grew up with or knew, because she realizes that this guy will sacrifice literally anything to get the Azran Legacy, and that's all he cares about is unlocking that secret. So while Descalay, Layton, and Layton are pursuing Bronev, Descalay becomes injured and he reveals his true identity to Layton.
I forget. Our parents were gone and we were left all alone. We had a house to live in, but it was a sad and lonely time. Then one day, we were told that an adoption had been arranged, but only for one of us.
But I don't want to go away.
Don't be silly. You'll be living with the Layton family from now on.
But Herschel, I want to stay with you.
Don't call me that. Remember, that's your name now, Herschel. How do you do, Mr. and Mrs. Layton? This is my brother Herschel.
So, you're the famous Herschel, eh? We've heard that you're a very clever boy.
Well, hello there, little Herschel. It's such a shame. You know we can't take both of you.
Yes, but I know Herschel will be happy.
And what about you?
Oh, don't worry. A family in the village will take care of me. The Fibs.
I see. Well, it was nice to meet you anyway.
You too. Be happy, brother. This is the start of your new life. Your life as Herschel Layton.
So he reveals his true identity to Layton, and that is that he's actually his brother, and Leon Bronev is actually their father. And the two brothers were separated when Leon was kidnapped by Targent and their mom. But Leon eventually ends up like leading Targent, and like he kind of doesn't really care that like he basically sacrificed his wife and his whole children for this Azran Legacy, because even though they kidnapped them, like he becomes in charge. He could have gone back at any point. So that the brothers were separated, and Layton recalls these memories that he had kind of purposely suppressed, where Descalay was born Herschel Bronev, but he gave his first name to his little brother because the family was like, okay, we're going to come and adopt Herschel Bronev. And Descalay, Herschel, whatever, was like, okay, well, I want my little brother to be adopted so that he can be with this great family, the Layton family, and forget about this whole mess with his Bronev family. And Descalay only tried to thwart Layton this entire, like, trilogy so that he wouldn't get wrapped up with Targent again. But Desclée himself never forgot about this and had a massive vendetta against the group that ruined his whole life, because Desclée I don't think he really ever got adopted, and basically, like, kind of grows up with nothing. Like, his life was ruined. So he made this massive sacrifice for his little brother. Anyways, back in the cave chamber, Bronov unlocks the Azran Legacy by stabbing Aurora through the heart. Okay, pretty severe stuff. But the legacy ends up being not this, like, amazing power, but it ends up being the resting place of these things called the golems, and they're this mechanical race that was created by the Azran basically to, like, do all their bidding and stuff, but they became sentient, and ultimately were the reason for the Azran's, like, complete disappearance and downfall. So for that reason, the Azran froze the golems here, and Aurora reveals that she's a golem herself, created to be an emissary of the Azran, and, like, sent forth to be, like, the judge of future humanity, whoever discovered her. The fact that Bronov was willing to unleash the golems deems him, and they see him as the emissary for current humanity, so it basically condemns all of humanity to being awful. So Aurora, as this emissary, is basically forced to order the golems to attack the surrounding city and residents, and she snaps out of this, like, emissary trance and tries to stop the attack. But to literally prevent the apocalypse, Layton, Luke, Emmy, Desclée, and ultimately Bronov helps. They have to step into these light things, these light beams, and Aurora tells them, like, that's how you stop it, but if you do that, you're all going to die.
Wait. If you do this, if you step into the beams of light, you will die. Are you still willing to do it? The decision is yours, and yours alone. Will you take this chance to save humanity?
Luke.
It's the only way to save everyone. Professor, I have to do it.
I'll help you too.
Aurora.
We can do it!
Aurora!
It's not working for me, Professor!
Like, stepping into light kills you. And so they all do that. And they all die. And looking around, like, Aurora sees basically the only friends that she's ever had, just, like, dead. And Aurora is incredibly upset, and she begs the Azran spirits to take her instead and to say, like, look, they were willing to sacrifice themselves, judge them as the representatives of humanity, and take me instead. And they agree. Before she ends up sacrificing herself, like, they all get revived. She ends up saying her goodbyes, and by them being revived, this causes like the whole chamber thing that at this point, like, flown up into the sky to start crumbling. So Aurora thanks Layton and Luke and Emmy and all them for caring about her, and she says her goodbyes, and she says that her last hope is that she can be reborn as a human like them.
What's going on? The Azran Sanctuary has fulfilled its purpose. And so too have I. I thank you all.
Aurora!
I must fade into obscurity along with the Azran. That is my fate. I am the last of the Azran golems. My body will soon cease to function.
I'm sorry.
No! Stop! Come with us!
Let's go. Luke!
Again, these games are so sad. Ugh. Anyways, so as the entire thing is falling apart, Layton, Luke, Emmy, and Bronev are all in one piece, and Disclay's on the other piece, and they're falling.
Farewell, Layton.
Discolay!
They're back on the ground, and the police have been like following this. So Bronev's arrested, and he tells Layton that his real name is Theodore Bronev, and Layton rejects this identity and rejects Leon as his father, but he states that like he hopes that they can meet again one day as friends and as like fellow archaeologists. Then we see Emmy. She passes on her role as assistant to Luke, and she promises to return when she's worthy of that job. And then at the very end we see, well, not at the very end, but then we see Discolay. We see that he did survive the crash, and he's back on the airship. And then at the very, very end, we see Luke and Layton in the Laytonmobile, headed to St. Mystere, ready to solve the mystery of the Curious Village. And so, again, because this is the prequel trilogy, all of this happens, and then Curious Village. So, at this point, the timeline for Luke and Layton is The Last Spectre, Eternal Diva, Miracle Mask, Azran Legacy, Curious Village, Diabolical Box, Unwound Future. So, we've seen all of that. And this ends the, again, like, in canon story of Luke and Layton. And the next things I'm going to be talking about are the anime / Katrielle Mystery Journey game, and then the Mystery Room iOS game. And these two editions kind of give other important pieces of the Luke and Layton story, or more about like Layton's whole, I guess, like web of people connected to him. So that's where we're at now. Okay, so it's a new day, but now that we have gone over the first two trilogies, and like that part of the timeline, now we can move on to the anime that's called like Layton Detective Agency, and also the game Katrielle's Mystery Journey, which is on the 3DS and the Switch. So the anime and the game cover basically the same time frame, but the anime has a lot more info. So the format of it is it's just like a bunch of cases, and a lot of them are just like random like episodic cases. But then there's ones that specifically talk about Layton and Luke and like that storyline. And a lot of the cases from the game, I think if not all of them, are taken straight from the anime. And the basic premise that this takes place about 25 years, about 25 years after the Unwound Future. And the main character is Katrielle. This is Professor Layton's daughter, which we'll get more into. And she runs a detective agency in London with a guy named Ernest Greaves. And his name is different in the Japanese version. And a talking dog named Shirl. And again, there are like 50 episodes. I'm not going to go through all the cases. I'm just going to talk about the plot points and like the 6 episodes that talk about Katrielle, Layton, and Luke and their story. But at this point in the series, Katrielle hasn't known where Layton is. Luke and Layton have been missing for a while. So in episode 10 of the anime, Rosa, who's a character we see briefly in the games, she's like Layton's like housekeeper, kind of a family friend. They're really close, but she's also at this point Kat's like guardian since Layton's been missing. So she comes in episode 10 and starts telling Kat more about Layton's disappearance, which I just think this is funny because again, he's been missing for like 10 or 11 years at this point, and you would think that she would have a few more questions. But okay, we'll just tell the story. So Rosa tells the story. Years after Luke brought Kat to Layton, 10 years after, Luke's wife, Marina... Okay, so I'm editing my video now, and I'm just looking up pictures, like, to put in the video, and I looked at pictures of Marina Triton, Luke's wife, and I completely forgot that there is a Marina that we've already met at this point, who's in Diabolical Box. So that's Marina Triton, and this is Marina that we meet, who lives in Fall Sense. And remember, Fall Sense is like the Phantom Town, so I guess, like, technically that Marina isn't real. I still don't really know how Fall Sense people are supposed to work, but let me know if you guys think that there's a connection there, because both of them have purple hair. And I mean, plenty of people in this game have purple hair, I guess. But I think they kind of look alike. And even their color schemes, like outfits, are the same. Comes to ask Layton for his help because Luke had disappeared after trying to find these things called the relic stones and trying to solve this mystery of like the relics. So Layton goes to like find Luke. He finds him pretty quick. Don Paolo's also just like randomly involved in this, and I think it's really just more of like a callback. But Don Paolo's there, and Luke's basically been trapped while trying to find these stones. So Layton frees him. Great. We also learned that these relic stones are like there's a bunch of stones that have been scattered around the world, and like each stone points to the next stone's location, and it's like a massive loop. And Layton's like, okay, well, we need to gather them all in one place, and we'll see what happens. And then at the end, Rose is like, oh, I left my oven on, I have to go. And you're like, okay. So then there's like 10 more random episodes, and then in episode 20, we get more of the story. We see who Katrielle, like, really is, because you know that she's adopted. Like, the game ends with her reading a letter saying that she's adopted, but I think at this point is the point in the anime that she finds that out. But so this is where we see that. Years after, we see Luke leave Layton at the end of Unwound Future. About 5 years after, Luke is on a sinking ship headed for Southampton, and on the ship he helps a pregnant woman named Camilla Azan give birth. The baby is born, but the woman doesn't make it off the ship. Instead, she gives Luke instructions to bring the baby to one Herschel Layton so that he can find the father, who's this guy named Azran, who's an archaeologist who went missing while looking for the relic's treasure. So Luke tries to do this, but Layton's like, I do not know this man. And he's like, all right, well, I'll just watch this baby. You'll say she's mine, name her Katrielle until I find her dad and solve the relic mystery. After a while, he just like cannot find this guy, so he formally adopts Katrielle. I guess doesn't really tell her. And then they set out when Kat is like 10 years old to find the relic stones. They soon come to realize, Layton realizes that there never was a guy named Azran, and that the archaeologist looking for the relic stones and looking to solve this mystery was Kat's mom, Camilla. But Layton still wants to solve this mystery for Kat's sake, and he feels like doing it will like actually make them family, because he wants to like, help her figure out her family and her heritage and stuff. So they have 6 stones. And they had the place, they're at the place where all the stones like led them to, and it's like this cave. But they have to wait until low tide to enter the cave. They realize that's what Kat's mom Camilla must have done too, because they're kind of like tracking where she was. Another fun little fact that I realized, just while looking back at it, is in Layton Mystery Detective Agency anime, when they're looking for the relics, they stay at a hotel, and it is the same exact hotel that they stay at in Miss Tallery in the last Spectre. Like, this is the hotel layout from the anime, and I just know. It looks the same from the outside, too, as the one from last Spectre, but it's the same. But anyways, they use the stones to open this, like, pathway, and they realize that Kat's mom must have had to go back to London because she must have sold the stones in order to like fund it. So that's why she was on that ship back to Southampton to head back to London. So they go in, they use the stones, but this is the last we hear. And Rosa tells us that this is the last that she heard from them because Luke never wrote any more letters. And we'll figure out why that is. But the next, like continuing on from this point, the flashbacks that we see of Luke and Layton, I don't know how we come to know them because Rosa didn't know them. So I guess, I don't know, but we know them. So at this point, Rosa tells Kat, like, okay, it's your place to decide what you want to do with this. Obviously, she decides she's going to solve the mystery and figure out where Luke and Layton went because they've been missing for like 10 or 11 years at this point. Kat also deduces that she thinks that Camilla did not sell the stones in London, but that she thinks Camilla realized that there was a seventh stone and that's why she came back. But either way, she had to come back. So then in episode 34, this story continues. Kat starts off just kind of like recapping. So again, she's the daughter of Camilla Azran, an archaeologist looking to solve the mystery of the relics, and that her adopted father, Professor Layton, went missing trying to find this treasure. So now Kat is going to solve the mystery in order to find the treasure and also in order to find Luke and Layton who went missing. So we return to Luke and Layton's like timeline from 10 years ago, and we see them finally go into this relics gate where the treasure is supposed to be housed, but it's completely empty. And Layton figures that whatever was in there was removed about 100 years ago from that time because he's an archaeologist, so he can look at the walls and he just knows that. But they also figured that Camilla must have known that, so why did she send them on this hunt if she knew that the relics weren't there? So anyways, Luke and Layton deduced that whoever took the relics must have taken them by sea to Southampton. And Camilla must have known that because that's where she was headed when she met Luke. So they know that she knew this. They nearly escape being followed by people because at this point, people try to kidnap them. Again, they escape, but that is why they stop updating Rosa because they're like, shit, maybe this is dangerous because people are also looking for this. We're back with Katrielle, and she realizes that somebody must have found the relics already, and Camilla wanted Layton to solve the mystery of who took them, who found them originally. So now we're back in Luke and Layton's time, and they're back in London 10 years prior, where Layton realizes that the two people who found the relics were named Rufus Aldebaran, and Earl Drake Delendar. They also deduce that the team must have hid the treasures in Cranscroll Cathedral because the Earl built this massive cathedral right before them two disappeared. So there's a lot of disappearances in this. Then we flash back, and at this point, Kat leaves for Southampton to find them. In episode 35, Kat starts off by recapping. So again, these whole 6 episodes just like flash back and forth, and it's very confusing. But so 110 years ago from the present, the Earl and Rufus found the relics. 20 years ago, Camilla, Kat's mom, died while giving birth to Kat while being in the middle of this whole search. 10 years ago, Luke and Layton went missing looking for this same relic. And now Kat and her little posse are heading out to do the same exact thing. So in Southampton, Kat realizes that the cathedral must have built to conceal the relics. So at this point, she realizes everything that Layton had realized. So she goes to the cathedral, and she finds a message that the professor left for her there 10 years ago, and we see a flashback to when Luke and Layton were there, and we see what happened to them. They confront these priests in the cathedral because they realize that they've been hiding the relics, like they're this society like set to protect the relic, and they are captured. And they're put inside the, like, it's called the relic room, and they describe this as a door to the future that was never meant to be opened. So at this point, flashback ends, and Kat enters the cathedral. She confronts the priests with the same information that Layton left her in the message. And she had also called the cops because she's smart, and they all arrest the priests. So with the priests arrested, Kat heads off into the basement where the relic is, and she finds Luke and Layton in these weird coffin things, and they're like, okay, well, this must be the relic. So now we're at episode 49, and it's revealed that these coffins are basically like suspended animation or like cryogenic freezing tanks. We also meet Marina, again, Luke's wife, and she had infiltrated the priest organization to try to figure out and research and do all that. So she lets Luke and Layton out, and they're still like asleep, so they go to the hospital to like recover. She also tells Kat everything that she's learned, and that was that the Earl used the relics to try and send himself and his son into the future. And the priests were put in charge of maintaining this relic room, and the Earl made another organization called Witch, and this was supposed to kill all the priests if anything ever happened to the Earl and his son. But 10 years ago, at the same time Luke and Layton busted in, there had just been like an accident with the room where, because of like poor maintenance, I guess the Earl and his son did end up dying. And so the priests were like, oh crap, we have to hide this from that organization witch, otherwise we're all gonna freaking die. So Luke and Layton were put inside the coffins as like substitutes. Kat notices that there's a third coffin, which is empty, and all that was left is a fake relic stone. So Kat takes this and is like, all right, well, we got to figure out who left this. Like, the mystery is not done. And she thinks it's Aldebaran. They head to his old estate while Luke and Layton are recovering. Luke and Layton wake up. They meet Kat at Aldebaran's estate, and they have a really touching reunion.
カトリー、私の考えを聞いてくれるかい？大きくなったな、カトリー。
私のことわかるの？
当然だよ。体は大きくなっていても自分の娘のことがわからない親はいない。
おかえりなさい、パパ。
カトリー。
パパに話そうと思っていたことがいっぱいあるの。パパがいなくなった後はローザおばあ様が励ましてくれたし、引っ越しもしたの。パパと暮らしたお屋敷で暮らすのは辛かったから。でもそのおかげで新しい友達もできて、寂しいこともいっぱいあったけど嬉しいこともいっぱいあったよ。
カトリー、慌てることはないさ。カトリー、これから時間はたっぷりある。毎日君の話を聞くよ。
パパ
ごめんカトリー、長い間一緒にいてやれなくて。
パパ、やっと会えた。会いたかった。
私もだ、カトリー、会いたかった。
どんな過去があろうと、私のパパはパパだけだよ。
ああ、もちろんだカトリー。これからはずっと君と一緒にいる。約束するよ。
本当に？
ああ、嘘はつかない。英国紳士としてはね。
And the whole group uses the fake relic stone after this to solve a mystery left by Aldebaran. At this point, it's them to an observatory. In episode 50, they head to this observatory, they find a secret chamber, and there's another puzzle. They obviously solve that one too, and they end up meeting Aldebaran. He immediately tries to kill Layton and is like just talking a bunch of nonsense. He's also like turning purple and like he's basically dying, but he's like, oh, I have to test you and see if you're worthy of replacing me, and my words are backed up by a God-given power. And Layton's like, literally, what the hell are you talking about? I don't want to replace you. What are you talking about? So Aldebaran explains about how 10 years ago he realized that there was going to be a comet crash in the present day, and no one would listen to him. They don't really explain it, and that might be because this, like, I don't know, they don't explain it really much, but he's like, everybody in his time period thought he was trying to commit genocide, so I don't know where he went wrong in his explanation of what the hell a comet was, but that's what everybody back then thought. So anyways, no one listened to him, so he used the relics to try to send himself into the present day, because he figured once here, he could use the current day technology to like expand the relic room and save as many people as possible and bring them to the future past the comet and like past the basic like apocalypse. I don't know, it's a pretty shitty plan if you ask me. But now he's like, okay, I'm dying because he was damaged in the same incident that like killed the Earl and his son, so he does not have much time left. And he's like, Layton, you have to replace me, you've got to do this. And Layton's like, no. At this point, two investigators that are other characters in this anime, they come in because Layton had them follow him, and like they were investigating it too. And they had this like data that basically disproves Aldebaran's theory, and it basically says that there is a comet coming, but it's not going to be for another 120 years. So Aldebaran dies, and we get like a little epilogue. Because they're like, okay, well, you know, future generations, like, we'll give this information to the right people and, like, we're gonna solve it. But, like, Layton's not gonna go back into the relic room and, like, go to the future. Like, that's just not realistic. But anyways, so that mystery solved. We get an epilogue. Luke and Layton move back to London. Kat continues as a detective. Layton starts teaching back at Gresham Hiller University. And the very last scene is a character named Alfendi Layton, who we will get into, and he enters the agency. And so that's the relic story that's kind of scattered throughout the anime, and it ultimately ends the anime. Overall, I think the anime is really cute, and it has, like, a lot of, like, the individual cases have the same kind of, like, tragically sad, but, like, heartwarming almost vibe as a lot of the other Layton games. Some other people have made videos where about how the video game falls short, because I don't think the video game's good, and I'll just put some of those, like, in the description. I'm not going to go into it too much. I will say, though, I just don't really understand why the game chose to cover random cases instead of following this relic story. And it's, like, the cases that they covered, it's not just, like, the timeline, like, the game came out before those episodes came out. That's just not true. Like, the game goes into the backstory of Kat's assistant, Ernest Greaves, and, like, no offense to him, like, he's a fine character, but, like, I just don't really care about him. Like, he's not core to, like, the Layton story. And the game, like I said, also ends with Katrielle reading a letter that Layton left for her in case he went missing. So effectively, you spend the whole game, like the game ends at the start of the relic story. And this is just frustrating because you play the whole game doing random mysteries, kind of like waiting for a bigger story. And then at the end, it's just like, lol, Kat, you're not my real daughter. And she's like, okay, I'm gonna go find my dad. And then it ends and you're like, okay, cool. I don't get to actually do any of the fun stuff. But again, I think the anime is really cute. And I would recommend watching that, but I don't really recommend the game. So that is that. And now we can move on to the final part. All right, so we're finally at the last installment of the franchise that I'm going to cover, and that is called the Layton Brothers Mystery Room. And this game is weird. So originally this game, let me preface this by saying this game came out in 2013. So I think it came out like right after Miracle Mask. So there was still, after that, then it was Azran Legacy, then the anime, then Katrielle's Mystery Journey. There's like a lot that came after that. So just keep that in mind. But this game was originally going to be part of some other Level 5 series as a DS game, but at some point in the development, they decided to change it to a Layton franchise game, and they just basically like created the characters to fit into this universe. They also bizarrely decided to make it an iOS game. I don't think, looking more into it, I think it is just on Apple, but no one really knows why they did that. That was like such a weird move. You can still get it. It was made for iOS 4, but you can still get it today. But that being said, everything in this game is confirmed canon. So like I in good conscience, I couldn't not go over it. So this game, like I said, features, well, maybe I didn't say, but it features a character named Alfendi Layton, who again, we saw at the very end of the anime. And this is Professor Layton's son. Not adopted son, as far as I can tell, his son, okay? And he works at Scotland Yard, and he has an assistant named Lucy Baker, and they are the two main characters in this game. This game also takes place, I guess, let's see, about 20 years after, no, about 25 years, yeah, about 25 years after the Unwound Future ends, so after the, like, actual Luke Layton story ends. So way in the future, but about the same time as Katrielle Mystery Journey, or right after that. So Alfendi Layton is Professor Layton's son. He works at Scotland Yard, and he has an assistant named Lucy Baker, and they're the two main characters in the game. And I am not going to go into the cases that they solve. I'm only going to talk about what we learn about Alfendi from the cases. So Alfendi is revealed to have dissociative identity disorder, and Lucy describes this as like him having two distinct like Jekyll and Hyde personalities, and she calls them like the placid prof, and that's like the good one, and like the potty prof, and like that's the bad one. Just a disclaimer, I'm no expert, but I really doubt this is a great representation of any of the corresponding real life mental illnesses. I don't know. I'm just betting this is a horrible representation of these things, so take that as you will. Anyways, a lot of times, like Placid Prof is unable to solve the case, and at that point Putty Prof will like step in and wrap it up. And that's kind of like the dynamic for most of the cases. In the final case, Alfendi is the main suspect, and we come to learn the like cause for his disorder. Again, I don't know about the scientific validity of this these implications. But anyways, their story is that after some like incident, he ended up in a coma where he ended up being brainwashed into thinking that he committed a murder, and this kind of like split his psyche and created a separate identity, one in which Alfendi like knew that he was guilty, but in reality he never killed anyone. So that's the explanation they give. Also, in like I said, in the Katrielle game, in the anime, we see him. In Katrielle game, we see Kat writing to Alfendi, so the two knew each other, but it's not really clear, like, any more about how he fits into that. Again, this app came out in, like, 2013, and the anime and the game, Katrielle's game, and other games had plenty of time to, like, the creators had so much time to weave him into the story and to make him make sense in some sort of way, and they just like don't. So I don't know if this was just created by a completely separate branch of level 5 games, or I don't know. Also, we have no clue who his mother is, because again, Layton has a fair amount of like adopted kids. Like he basically is Luke's guardian for so much of this game, even though Luke's mom is, I'm pretty sure, dead, but Luke's dad is fine. And then there's Flora, who is Layton's adopted daughter after her father died and after the events of Curious Village. And then we have Kat, who is his adopted daughter. So like that's, you know, at least Kat and Flora are like in law, I'm pretty sure, his like children, okay? And then you introduce like this whole character who's actually his kid, like biologically. But I'm gonna try to do some deducing of my own to figure out who his mom is. So just in this game, Alfendi. Oh, okay, wait, one more thing. They also call it you might have noticed I called it the Layton Brothers mystery game. Alfendi doesn't have a brother. Like, it's just him. They don't mention anyone else. And so people think that this is, like, because of his split personality, that those are, like, the two Layton brothers. But, like, I don't know. I think this whole game, like I said, is really weird. But again, in this game, Alfendi is said to be like 29. Most of the ages are, I don't know, somebody figured them out. I don't know if they're like actually ever said, but I think he actually is in the game said to be 29. And if this is all about 25 years after the Unwound Future, at that point when Layton was 37, that would mean that Alfendi was about 4 years old when the Curious Village takes place. And that would mean that Alfendi was born either like during or right before the events of the last Spectre, when Layton was about 33. And Claire died when Layton was 27. So it's not her son. Like, okay, we'll continue thinking about this into the next part, but those are just like my quick calculations. Let me know down in the comments if like anybody's thought about this. Like, I don't know. I could be wrong, but I know that it doesn't say anywhere where like who the hell this dude's mom is. So that is the last installment of the franchise that I'm going to talk about in this timeline. So we did it. But now that we have most of the Layton story, again, look at the beginning, those two timelines I gave. There were a lot of things I did not talk about, but we have most of the Layton story. So we can track down Layton's whole life. So let's do that. Okay, so Layton was born under the name Theodore Bronev. And I think this is like about in the 20s. Again, they don't really give years, but about the 20s. So he was born under the name Theodore Bronev. His birth parents are Leon and Rachel Bronev, and he had a brother named Herschel Bronev. After his parents were kidnapped by Targent, him and his brother were separated, and our protagonist took the name Herschel Layton and was adopted by Roland and Lucille Layton. After they adopted him, they moved to a small town of Stansbury, and this is where he became friends with Randall and Angela. As a kid, Layton was also really into fencing, and that's why he's really good at like sword fighting and all these games. So one day, Randall and Layton went to look for the Azran ruins of Akbadain. Randall fell into the abyss and seemingly died. And again, Randall was also the one who got Layton interested in archaeology. And Layton was so shocked by this that he left Stansbury and moved to London. So then Layton attended Grayson-Heller University under the tutelage of Dr. Andrew Schrader. Here he met Don Paolo. Don Paolo is in the grade above him, and like, I say met, but like very loosely. Again, I don't think Layton ever really knew who he was, which is just so funny to me. But anyways, he also met Luke Triton's dad, Clark Triton, in college, and finally he met Claire. And the two started dating in college, and they dated up into the point where Layton was 27. Because at this point, at the age 27, Layton got a job as a professor, and this was also Claire and his anniversary, and that's when she bought him his signature hat to celebrate him becoming a professor. Later that same day, she died in the explosion caused by Bill Hawks at the lab that she worked at with Dimitri Allen. And at this point, Layton decided to never take the hat off out of respect for Claire, and Claire's death also inspired him to become a perfect gentleman. So this is like, it's so bad to say, but this is like his origin story, I guess. I don't know, that's really, really bad. But okay, during this explosion, in the streets, remember, Layton briefly meets Clive after Clive's parents were killed, and Clive was orphaned in this explosion. A year after the explosion, Layton met Emmy Altava, and he basically saved her from being arrested for a theft for which she was framed, and the arresting officer was Inspector Grosky, so that's when he met Grosky as well. At some point before the last Spectre, but after Claire's death, and after he meets Emmy, Layton meets some woman and has Alfendi. And no one knows where the hell this kid is the entire series, but that's that. At this point, we have all the events of Professor Layton in the last Spectre. So again, he gets a letter from his old friend Clark Triton. He meets Luke, solves like the whole mystery. They defeat Descolet for the first time and meet Descolet. And again, Descolet like knows who Layton is, but Layton's like, you seem kind of familiar, but I don't know. And they find the Golden Garden. The Azran ruins of the Golden Garden. Hooray, cool. Then we have the events of the Eternal Diva. That's the whole opera story. Alright, Descolet is there too. They raise the lost Azran city of Ambrosia, defeat Descolet again. Great. Next, we have the events of the Miracle Mask. Layton is reunited with the once thought to be dead Randall. They discover the Azran ruins of Akbadain and defeat Descolet one more time. At this point, Bronev and Targent have control of the 3 Azran sites, and they're now ready to unlock the Azran Legacy. So then we have the events in the Azran Legacy. In this, they go on a globe-trotting adventure, and Layton learns about his past and his true identity and family. So this is when he finds out that Leon Bronev is his father, that Descolet is his brother, and I guess Emmy, who is Leon Bronev's niece, is Layton's cousin. I guess that's how that works. Anyways, Bronev is arrested, and Descolet escapes, and we don't really ever see him again. But then Emmy leaves the professor, promising to maybe eventually return if she ever feels worthy. So now it's just Luke and Layton. And then we see the events of the Curious Village. The professor and Luke defeat Don Paolo for the first time, and Layton's like, sorry to this man, but I do not know this man. Anyways, then we also meet Flora. Layton becomes her adopted dad. He's a horrible father to her. Can't express that enough. Anyways, now we have the events of the Diabolical Box. They discover the secrets of False Sense and the Elysian Box, and they thwart Don Paolo from taking the box one more time. Here, too, I do not think the professor realizes who he is. So, at this point, this is when we maybe possibly have the events of the Ace Attorney crossover. This doesn't really affect Layton's life story, but those events are usually put by fans at this point in the story. So that's when this takes place. After that, we have the Unwound Future. Layton solves the mystery of the future London, realizes it was Clive, basically trying to get revenge on Bill Hawks and basically all of London for that explosion that killed his parents. Layton also realizes, I think finally, who Don Paolo is, and they both meet Dimitri Allen. And Layton, I don't think ever knew Dimitri Allen, but he was aware of him because Claire did work with him in this lab, so he kind of knew him. All 3 of them really cared for and loved Claire. And Dimitri Allen was working to save her life because she didn't fully die in this explosion 10 years ago. Rather, she was sent 10 years forward to this point in time, but her presence in the timeline was unstable, and she eventually is sent back to the moment of the explosion to die. At the end of this game, we see Luke boarding a ship headed for his new home, which I think is in America, and we eventually see Luke like write a letter to Layton. So 5 years after that point, Luke is 15, and he is back in England on a ship headed for Southampton when the boat begins to sink. He meets Camilla Zahn, who is pregnant. He helps her give birth to the baby. Camilla dies after giving Luke instructions to bring the baby to Layton to solve the mystery of the relics. Luke does this, and now Layton is the adoptive father of the baby, whom he names Katrielle. So again, at this point, Luke is about 15 and Layton is about 42. He was about 34 at the beginning of, what's that game called? Of the Last Spectre, and about 37 at the beginning of Curious Village. And now he's 42. Layton raises Kat for 10 years when, like, Luke's wife comes in and is like, my boyfriend, my husband's missing. And so then he saves Luke after he'd been kidnapped by Don Paolo, who was also randomly on the quest for these relics. And at this point, Luke and Layton go on the search for the relics, and they're captured by the priests and put into a cryogenic sleep for 10 or 11 years. After 10 or 11 years, Kat finds them. They solve the relic mystery in the anime, and at the very end, Layton is teaching at Grayson Hill University. Him and Luke also solve mysteries with Kat's agency. And at this point, I guess the ages are weird because they were like cryogenically asleep and technically didn't age, but I guess technically Layton would be about, let's see, when him and Luke set off, Luke is 25, so then Layton is 52. Oh, that's so weird. And then I guess if you're considering this, their aging, Luke would technically be 35 and Layton would technically be 62. But I guess he didn't age, so I guess he's still only 52. That's crazy. Anyways, after they find the relics and do all that and finish that, we see Alfendi and Lucy Baker enter the agency. And about this point, although it might overlap with Katrielle's mystery journey and that timeline, these are the events of Layton Brothers' mystery room. And we don't really care about those. But so that is Layton's story, and the only thing we really don't know is who the fuck is Alfendi's mother. It is possible that Level 5 will make another game, likely focusing on Katrielle, and maybe we'll get more information on that, but for now we just don't know. Another thing to touch on, I guess pragmatically, is that Level 5, like recently at the beginning of this year, shut down their North American branch, so that's just really sad because even if Level 5 in Japan continues to make games, I don't know what that means for them being localized into, like, American English. So that is sad, but we might not ever get a game. But Katrielle's Mystery Journey, even though it's not a great game, it did sell really well. So maybe we will get a game. So we did it. We mapped out the whole franchise. We mapped out a whole, like, timeline for Layton. And now I'm gonna finally talk about some of the highs and the lows. And because I just talked about this, obviously a low for me is just the whole existence of Alfendi Layton. I think it's just sad because he was just shoehorned into the franchise when they made that weird development decision to change it from whatever other Level 5 game it was to a Professor Layton game. But at the same time, they did have so many games to weave him in. It's just bizarre because part of me thinks that they made this iOS game and they set it so far in the future that they didn't think it would ever run into the other Professor Layton games. Because again, it came out right after Miracle Mask. So at this point, this game is like 20 years after the events of Miracle Mask. More? Yeah, no, like 30 years after. So I don't know. I don't think they thought about it, but they had so much time to weave him in, and I don't know why they didn't, but they didn't. I also think it's a shame because it really just like destroys almost the like integrity of Layton's like, not his like moral character, but the character that they've built up for him. Because again, this Alfendi cannot be Claire's kid, unless if I've gotten something wrong with the timeline, because the anime does change the timeline a little bit. But I still think it doesn't line up with Alfendi being Claire's kid. And also, dude, did he not notice her giving birth? I don't know. I don't think it's Claire's kid. And Layton never really dated anyone again. So are we to just believe that after Claire dies and he takes on this vow of becoming a perfect gentleman, and he just goes on this, like, string of one-night stands? Like, I just don't Do you think he takes off his hat? Anyways, we don't know who this man's mother is, but that's that, the first low. Another low, and I've touched on this, is they just snub Flora. Like, I cannot get over how many times in the first trilogy they just, like, leave her places. And I just do not think that that is very gentlemanly. I get that they're worried about her safety, but at some point, leaving her so that she's gonna be basically, she's gonna end up following you anyways. Like, how is that any better? I don't know. I think it sucks. I think they treat her like shit, and I hate it. But that's that. Another low is, like I said, the timeline and the facts are just really hard to follow. And I wouldn't have, like, part of that is okay because it is a puzzle game, so I think it's okay that they make the timeline and his story like its own little puzzle and mystery. But I think it's really bizarre that they have so much of these like canon points hidden in little movies or like anime, like, and all, I mean, there's all these other manga stuff too, which I haven't read because it hasn't been localized, which is kind of a problem. But again, that's just because I don't speak Japanese. That's not like a franchise fault or whatever. But I think it is really weird that they introduce so many things in places where you wouldn't really expect them. And also like in forms of media that like you might not have accessibility to. Like, I don't know. It's very odd. Sorry about that. So like I was saying, again, it's just very odd to me that they hide these facts in places that you wouldn't necessarily expect them to be. Like, before making this video, before looking more into it, I had no idea that he had another son named Alfendi Layton who just appears in some random iOS game. Like, that's just bizarre. It's just weird. So that's kind of a low. But for the highs of this game, first of all, I hope I did an okay job of showing this, but these games are so incredibly good at telling like really tragic and kind of like heart-wrenching stories, but while also making them really beautiful. And like, I think I don't know, I feel like these games just show a lot of like really beautiful things about the human character, even when, you know, there are a lot of like villains, but even the villains like are more complicated than that. Like, I would say Don Paolo is probably the weakest villain. And even we like see where this comes from. I think Descole's like whole villain origin story, I guess if you want to call it that, is like kind of beautiful in like a weird way. And I think it's also a real testament to the story creators that they can make you feel so much and make me literally sob over the stories that are at the core of the games like themselves that involve the non-franchise characters. Like, Descole is a franchise character, so you know, you're gonna come to feel things for him over time. But like, thinking about the Diabolical Box, like that story is just so beautiful. Like the love story between Anton and Sophia, and like I don't know, I think it's a real testament to their skill that they can do that with characters that you don't come into the game already having pre-existing notions of them and caring for them. You only meet like Anton so late in the game. You don't come to know those characters like really, and you don't build that attachment, but just through like the storytelling alone that comes at the end of the game, even if you don't read all the diary entries and all the other like stuff that tells you more background, like they can still make you feel so much in that moment. And especially despite like the logical inconsistencies of like the fake town of False Sense or phantom town of False Sense, none of that affects the emotion conveyed through their love story and through that. And I just like really cannot overstate how much that story just like hit me when I first played it as a kid. And I just think it's really incredible. Especially the first trilogy has a lot of these beautiful, beautiful stories. Another incredible high that, you know, it's a puzzle game, and for the majority of the franchise, the puzzles are absolutely insane and brilliant, and they're so varied. You don't, like, even after, you know, I've been replaying these games a lot ever since I first got them as a kid, and you don't really get bored of them. they're just insane. The puzzle creator for most of the franchise, Akira Tago, is just a complete like genius. And unfortunately, he passed away before Katrielle's Mystery Journey, and you definitely see the decline in these puzzles. But I don't even like fault level 5 for that, because Akira Tago again was just such like a singular genius that I really doubt that there's anyone in our lifetime who could ever fill his shoes. And I know that sounds pretty hyperbolic, but I honestly don't think it is. If you've ever played the game and compared it to other puzzle games, or even compared the whole franchise to Katrielle's Mystery Journey, there's just like a liveliness and like, again, like a genius that like he brings. Like this, I don't know, this sounds really overblown, but I really don't think it is. And at this point, like, again, I'm 21, I'm still playing these games, I'm in grad school, I think I'm pretty smart, and a lot of these older puzzles, like when I replay them, they still fucking like stump me, and I think that's crazy. So the puzzles are really good. Another huge high point for this game is the soundtracks. Holy shit, the freaking soundtracks to every game, the anime, the movies, the Ace Attorney game, all of it. They are all so good. And hopefully you could kind of hear that from the cutscenes I showed. But if you ever need like just background music while you're playing homework or some task like that, you can look up a playlist of the soundtrack, because they're just so good, like just so good. But that basically wraps up the video. Again, I can't really even put into words how much I love these games and how just, I guess, formative they were to me as a kid. Like I said, I still replay them. I've probably replayed the first trilogy like 10 times, and I just don't think they ever get old. Even if you've never played them, you know, I mean, this whole video spoiled everything, but I can't spoil the puzzles for you. And I think they ported, I think, the first trilogy onto the iPhone, and I feel like it would play pretty well on the iPhone. So maybe it's on the other app stores, I don't know. But you should check them out. Hopefully they will port them to the Switch eventually. I really hope so. But if you've played them and you have anything to add, like any theories about Alfendi or anything I missed or anything like that, please put it in the comments. Like I said, this timeline is pretty confusing to me at times, and I'm sure I got things wrong or missed something. So please put that if you have any thoughts. But yeah, I hope you guys liked it. I know this was super long, but I really enjoyed making it. Like I said, it helped me like figure out a lot of stuff about the whole timeline and like Layton's whole story. But hopefully you learned something about our favorite gentleman. But thanks for watching. See you next time.